Chapter 12. The Tang Emperor keeps faith and holds a great mass longing, appears to the reincarnated golden cicada. When the devil officers left the underworld with Lu Quan and his wife, a dark and whirling wind blew them straight to the great capital Chang'an, where Lu Quan's soul was sent to the golden pavilion and Li Kulian's to an inner courtyard of the palace, where Princess Yuan could be seen walking, slowing beside some moss under the shade of some blossoming trees. Suddenly the devil officers struck her full in the chest and knocked her over. They snatched the soul from her living body and put Li Kulian's soul into the body in its place. With that they returned to the underworld. When the palace serving women saw her drop dead, they rushed to the throne hall to report to the three empresses that Her Royal Highness the Princess had dropped dead. The shocked empresses passed the news on to Taizong, who sighed and said, "We can well believe it. When we asked the 10 lords of hell if young and old in our palace would all be well, they replied that they would all be well except that our younger sister was going to die suddenly." How true that was. He and everyone else in the palace went with great sorrow to look at her lying under the trees, only to see that she was breathing very lightly. "Don't wail," the Tang Emperor said. "Don't wail, it might alarm her." Then he raised her head with his own hand and said, "Wake up, sister, wake up, sister, wake up." All of a sudden the princess sat up and called out, "Don't go so fast, husband. Wait for me." "Sister, we're waiting for you here," said the emperor. The princess lifted her head, opened her eyes and looked at him. "Who are you?" she asked. "How dare you put your hands on us?" "It's your august brother, royal sister," replied Taizong. "I got nothing to do with august brothers and royal sisters," said the princess. "My maiden name is Li, and my full name is Li Kulian. My husband is Lu Quan, and we both come from Junsu. When I gave a gold hairpin to a monk at the gate 3 months ago, my husband said harsh words to me about leaving the women's quarters and not behaving as a good wife should. It made me so angry and upset that I hanged myself from a beam with a white silk sash, leaving a boy and a girl who cried all night and all day. As my husband was commissioned by the Tang Emperor to go to the underworld to deliver some pumpkins, the kings of hell took pity on us and let the two of us come back to life. He went ahead, but I lagged behind. When I tried to catch him up, I tripped. You are all quite shameless to be mauling me like this. I don't even know your names. We think that Her Royal Highness is delirious after passing out when she fell," said Taizong to the palace women. He sent an order to the medical academy for some medicinal potions and helped Ying into the palace. When the Tang Emperor was back in his throne hall, one of his aides came rushing in to report, "Your Majesty Lu Quan, the man who delivered the pumpkins, is awaiting your summons outside the palace gates." The startled Taizong immediately sent for Lu Quan, who prostrated himself before the vermilion steps of the throne. "What happened when you presented the pumpkins?" asked the Tang Emperor. "Your subject went straight to the Devil Gate with the pumpkins on my head. I was taken to the Senluo Palace where I saw the 10 kings of hell, to whom I presented the pumpkins, explaining how very grateful my emperor was. The kings of hell were very pleased. They bowed in your majesty's honor and said, 'How splendid of the Tang Emperor to be as good as his word.'" "What did you see in the underworld?" asked the emperor. "I did not go very far there, so I did not see much. But when the kings asked me where I was from and what I was called, I told them all about how I had volunteered to leave my family and my children to deliver the pumpkins because my wife had hanged herself. They immediately ordered demon officers to bring my wife, and we were reunited outside the Senluo Palace. Meanwhile, they inspected the registers of births and deaths and saw that my wife and I were both due to become immortals. So they sent devil officers to bring us back. I went ahead with my wife following behind, and although I was fortunate enough to come back to life, I don't know where her soul has been put." "What did the kings of hell say to you about your wife?" asked the astonished emperor. "They didn't say anything," replied Lu Quan, "but I heard a demon officer say, 'As Li Kulian has been dead for some time, her body has decomposed.' To this, the kings of hell said, 'Lai Yuing of the Tang House is due to die today, so we can borrow her body to put Li Kulian's soul back into.' As I don't know where this Tang House is or where she lives, I haven't been able to go and look for her yet. The Tang Emperor, who was now very pleased, said to his officials when we were leaving the kings of hell, we asked them about our family. They said all its members would be well except for my sister. She collapsed and died under the shade of some blossoming trees, and when we hurried over to support her, she came to, shouting, "Don't go so fast, husband. Wait for me." We thought at the time that she was just talking deliriously after passing out, but when we asked her to tell us more here, story tallied precisely with Liu Quan's. If Her Royal Highness died suddenly and came to shortly afterwards talking like this, then it means that Liu Quan's wife must have borrowed her body to come back to life, said Wei Zhang. Things like this do happen. The princess should be asked to come out so that we can hear what she says. We have just ordered the Imperial Medical Academy to send some medicine, so we don't know whether it will be possible, said the Tang Emperor, who then sent a consort into the palace to ask her to come out. The princess, meanwhile, was shouting wildly inside the palace, "I'm taking none of your medicine. This isn't my home. My home is a simple tiled house, not like this jaundiced yellow place with its flashy doors. Let me out, let me out." 4 or 5 women officials and 2 or 3 eunuchs appeared while she was shouting and helped her go straight to the throne hall, where the Tang Emperor asked, "Would you recognize your husband if you saw him?" What a thing to ask. We've been married since we were children, and I've given him a son and a daughter, so of course I'd recognize him. The Emperor told his attendants to help her down, and she went down from the throne hall. As soon as she saw Liu Quan in front of the white jade steps, she seized hold of him. "Husband!" she exclaimed. "Where'd you go? Why didn't you wait for me? I tripped over, and all these shameless people surrounded me and shouted at me." Wasn't that shocking? Although Liu Quan could hear that it was his wife talking, she looked like somebody else, so he did not dare to recognize her as his wife. "Indeed," said the Emperor, "sometimes mountains collapse, and the earth yawns open, but few men will shorten their lives to die for another." As he was a good and wise monarch, he gave all of the princess dressing, cases, clothes, and jewelry to Li Quan, as if they were a dowry, presented him with an edict freeing him from labor service for life, and told him to take the princess home with him. Husband and wife thanked him before the steps and returned home very happily. There's a poem to prove it. Life and death are prove it. Life and death are preordained. Some have many years, others few. When Liu Quan came back to the light after taking the pumpkins, Li Kulian returned to life in a borrowed body. After leaving the emperor, the pair went straight back to the city of Zhengzhou, where they found that their household and their children were all well. There is no need to go into how the two of them publicized their virtue rewarded. The story turns to Lord Yuqi, who went to Kaifeng in Hainan with a hoard of gold and silver for Xiang Liang, who made a living by selling water and dealing in black pots and earthen water and dealing in black pots and earthenware vessels with his wife, whose maiden name was Zhang, at the gate of their house. When they made some money, they were content to keep enough for their daily expenses, giving the rest as alms to monks or using it to buy paper ingots of gold and silver, which they assigned to various hordes in the underworld and burnt. That was why they were now to be so well rewarded. Although he was only a pious pauper in this world, he owned mountains of jade and gold in the other one. When Lord Yuqi brought them the gold and silver, Mr. and Mrs. Xiang were terrified out of their wits. Apart from his lordship, there were also officials from the local government office, and horses and carriages were packed tight outside their humble cottage. The two of them fell to their knees dumbfounded and began to kowtow. "Please rise," said Lord Yuqi. "Although I am merely an imperial commissioner, I bring gold and silver from His Majesty to return to you." Shivering and shaking, Xiang Liang replied, "I've lent out no silver or gold, so how could I dare to accept this mysterious wealth? I know that you are a poor man," said Lord Yuqi, "but you have given monks everything they need and bought paper ingots of gold and silver which you have assigned to the underworld and burnt, thus accumulating large sums of money down there. When His Majesty the Emperor Taizong was dead for 3 days before returning to life, he borrowed one of your hoards of gold and silver down there, which he is now repaying to you in full. Please check it through so that I can go back and report that I have carried out my instructions." Xiang Liang and his wife just went on bowing to heaven, and refused to take the gold and silver. If humble folk like ourselves took all this gold and silver, it'd soon be the death of us. Although we have burned some paper and assigned it to various stores, it was a secret. Anyhow, what proof is there that His Majesty, may he live for 10,000 years, borrowed gold and silver down there? We refuse to accept it. The emperor said that Judge Kiwi was his guarantor when he borrowed your money, and this can be verified, so please accept it, replied Lord Yuchi. I would sooner die than do so, Saxiang Li. Seeing how earnestly he refused, Lord Yuchi had to send a man back with a detailed report to the throne. On reading this report that Xiang Liang had refused to accept the gold and silver, Taizong said, he really is a pious old fellow. He sent orders to Yuchi Jingdi that he was to build a temple in his name, erect a shrine to him, and invite monks to do good deeds on his behalf. This would be as good as paying him back the gold and silver. On the day this decree reached him, Yuchi Jingdi turned towards the palace to thank the emperor and read it aloud for all to hear. Then he bought 50 mu of land and a place inside the city that would not be in the way from either the civil or the military point of view. And here work was begun on a monastery to be called the imperially founded Xiang Kuo Monastery. To its left was erected a shrine to Mr. and Mrs. Xiang with an inscribed tablet that read, built under the supervision of Lord Yuchi. This is the present great Xianggu Monastery. When he was informed that work had been completed, Taizong was very pleased, and assembling the multitude of officials, he issued a notice summoning monks to come and hold a great mass for the rebirth of those lonely souls in the underworld. As the notice traveled throughout the empire, the local officials everywhere recommended holy and venerable monks to go to Chang'an for the service. By the end of the month, many monks had arrived in Chang'an from all over the empire. The emperor issued a decree ordering Fu Yi, the deputy analyst, to select some venerable monks to perform Buddhist ceremonies. On hearing this command, Fu Yi sent up a memorial requesting a ban on the building of pagodas and saying that there was no Buddha. It read, by the law of the West, there are no distinctions between ruler and subject or between father and son. The 3 paths and the 6 roads are used to deceive the foolish. Past sins are chased away to filch future blessings, and Sanskrit prayers are recited in attempts to avoid retribution. Now birth, death, and the length of life are in fact decided by nature, and punishments, virtue, power, and blessings come from the Lord of men. But these days, vulgar believers distort the truth and say that they all come from Buddha, in the time of the 5 emperors and 3 kings of antiquity. This Buddha did not exist, yet rulers were enlightened, subjects were loyal, and prosperity lasted for many a long year. When foreign gods were first established in the time of Emperor Ming of the Han Dynasty, Sramanas from the West began to propagate their religion. This is in reality a foreign encroachment on China, and it does not merit belief. When he had heard this read to him, Taizong tossed it to his other officials for debate. The minister Xiao Yu stepped forward from the ranks, kowtowed and said, the Buddha's law has flourished for several dynasties, and by spreading good and preventing evil, it gives unseen help to the state. There is no reason why it would be abolished. Buddha was a sage. There is no reason why it would be abolished. Buddha was a sage. Those who deny sages are lawless. I request that he be severely punished. Fu Yi argued with Xiao Yu, pointing out that correct behavior was derived from serving one's parents and one's sovereign, whereas the Buddha turned his back on his parents, resisting the Son of Heaven, although he was but a commoner, and rebelling against his mother and father with the body that they gave him. Xiao Yu had not been born in an empty mulberry tree, but he honored a religion that denied fathers. This indeed proved that he who had no sense of filial piety denied his father. All Xiao Yu did was to put his hands together and say, hell must have been made for men such as him. Taizong sent for the High Chamberlain Zhang Doiyuan and the head of the Secretariat Zhang Shihang to ask them how effectively Buddhist ritual obtained blessings. The Buddha dwells in purity, benevolence, and mercy, the 2 officers replied, and the true result is Buddha, emptiness. Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty placed the 3 teachings in an order. The Chan master Da Hui wrote a poem in praise of the distant and mysterious. If the masses support monks, anything can happen. The 5 patriarchs came down to their mother's wombs, and Bodhidharma appeared. From remotest antiquity, everyone has said that the 3 teachings are highly venerable and cannot be destroyed or abolished. We humbly beg your majesty to give us his preceptive ruling. Your submission makes sense, said the delighted Taizong. If anyone else makes further comments, he will be punished. He then ordered Wei Zhang, Xiao Yu, and Zhang Daiyu, and Zhang Daiyuan to invite all the monks and select one of great virtue to be master of ceremonies. They all bowed to thank him and withdrew. From then on, there was a new law. Anyone who injured a monk or slandered the Buddha would lose his arm. The next day, the 3 court officials assembled all the monks at the altar among rivers and hills, and they went through them all one by one. From among them, they chose a venerable and virtuous monk. Do you know who he was? Fully versed in the basic mystery, his title was Golden Cicada. But because he did not want to hear the Buddha preach, he transferred to the mortal world to suffer torment, was born among the common mortals to fall into the net. From the moment he entered the womb, he met with evil. Before he left it, he encountered a gang of villains. His father was top graduate Chen from Heisu, his grandfather a senior imperial commander. His birth offended the meteor that dropped into the water. He drifted with the current and followed the waves. Jinshan Island had a great destiny. The abbot Qianan brought him up. Only at 17 did he meet his mother and go to the capital to find his grandfather. Commander Yin Kaishan, raising a great army, wiped out and punished the bandits at Hongsu. Graduate Chen Guangui escaped from the heavenly net, and father and son were happily reunited. Accepting the invitation, he receives once more the monarch's grace, and his fame is spread as he climbs the lofty tower. Refusing to take office, he wants to be a monk, so as Shramana of the Hongfu Temple, he learns about the Way, the child of an ancient Buddha who used to be called Jiang Liu, and took the Dharma, name of Chen Xuanzang. That day, the Reverend Xuanzang was chosen from among all the monks. He had been a monk from infancy, and ever since birth he had eaten vegetarian food and observed the prohibitions. His maternal grandfather was an imperial commander, Yin Kaishan. His father, Chen Guangui, had come top in the palace examination and had been appointed a grand secretary in the imperial library. Xuanzang, however, had no interest in honor and glory, and his only joy was to cultivate nirvana. Investigation revealed that his origins were good and his virtue great. Of the 1,000 sutras and 10,000 holy books, there was not a single one that he did not know. He could sing every Buddhist chant and knew all the religious music. The 3 officials took him to the imperial presence, where they danced and stirred up the dust. When they had bowed, they reported, "Your subject, Xiao Yu, and the rest of us have chosen a venerable monk called Chen Xuanzang in obedience to the imperial decree." On hearing his name, Taizong thought deeply for a long time and then asked, "Is that the Xuanzang who is the son of Grand Secretary Chen Guangui?" "Your subject is he," replied Xuanzang with a kowtow. "Then you were indeed well chosen," said the emperor with satisfaction. "You are indeed a monk of virtuous conduct, of a mind devoted to meditation. I give you the offices of left controller of the clergy, right controller of the clergy, and hierarch of the empire." Xuanzang kowtowed to express his thanks and accepted the appointments. The emperor then gave him a multicolored golden cassock and a Vairocana mitre, telling him to be sure he conscientiously continued to visit enlightened monks, and giving him the position at the top of the hierarchy. He gave him a decree in writing, ordering him to go to the Huaxing Temple to pick a propitious day, an hour on which to begin the recitations of the scriptures. Xuanzang bowed, took the decree, and went to the Huaxing Temple, where he assembled many monks, had meditation benches made, prepared for the Mass, and chose the music. He selected a total of 1,200 high and humble monks of enlightenment, who he divided into an upper, a middle, and a lower hall. All the holy objects were neatly arranged before all the Buddhas. The 3rd day of the 9th month of that year was chosen an auspicious day on which to start the 7 times 7 days of the Great Land and Water Mass. This was all reported to the throne, and at the appointed time Taizong, the high civil and military officials, and the royal family went to the service to burn incense and listen to the preaching. There is a poem to prove it that goes, "At the Dragon Assembly in the 13th year of Zhen Guan, the emperor called a great meeting to talk about the scriptures. At the assembly they began to expound the unfathomable law, while clouds glowed above the great shrine. The emperor in his grace orders the building of a temple. The golden cicada sheds his skin to edify the West. He spreads the news that rewards for goodness save from ill, preaching the doctrine of the three Buddhas of past and future. In the year GC, the 13th of Zhenguan, on the day Jiaxu, the 3rd of the 9th month, the hierarch Shen Zhuangzang assembled 1,200 venerable monks at the Hushan Temple in the city of Changjiang for a chanting of all the holy scriptures. After morning court was over, the emperor left the throne hall in his dragon and phoenix chariot at the head of a host of civil and military officials and went to the temple to burn incense. What did the imperial chariot look like? Indeed, propitious vapors filled the sky that shone with 10,000 beams of sacred light. A mellow breeze blew softly. The sunlight was strangely beautiful. 1,000 officials with jade at their belts walked in, due order. The banners of the 5 guards are drawn up on either side. Holding golden gourds, wielding battle axes, they stand in pairs. Lamps of purple gauze, imperial censers make majestic clouds. Dragons fly and phoenixes dance, ospreys and eagles soar. True is the enlightened Son of Heaven. Good are his just and loyal ministers. This age of prosperity surpasses the time of Shun and Yu. The eternal peace he has given out is that of Yao and Tang. Under a parasol with curved handle, the dragon robe sweeps in, dazzling bright. Interlocking jade rings, colored phoenix fans, shimmer with a magic glow. Pearl crowns and belts of jade, gold seals on purple cords. 1,000 regiments of soldiers protect the imperial chariot. 2 lines of generals carry the royal chair. Bathed and reverent, the emperor comes to worship the Buddha, submitting to the true achievement as he joyfully burns incense. When the carriage of the Tang emperor reached the temple, orders were given to stop the music as he descended from the vehicle, and went at the head of his officials to bow to the Buddha and burn incense. When he had done this 3 times, he looked up and saw what a magnificent assembly it was. Dancing banners, flying canopies. When the banners danced, the sky shook with the clouds of silk. When the canopies flew, the sun gleamed as the red lightning flashed. Perfect the image of the statue of the honored one. Mighty the grandeur of the Arhat's countenances. Magic flowers in a vase, censers burning sandalwood and lacquer. As the fairy flowers stand in vases, trees like brocade fill the temple with their brightness. As the censers burn sandalwood and lacquer, clouds of incense rise to the azure heaven. Fresh fruit of the season is piled in vermilion dishes. Exotic sweets are heaped on the silk-covered tables. Serried ranks of holy monks intone the mysteries to save abandoned souls from suffering. Taizong and his civil and military officials all burned incense, bowed to the golden body of the Lord Buddha, and paid their respects to the Arhats. The hierarch Chen Xuanzang then led all the monks to bow to the emperor, and when this was over, they divided into their groups and went to their meditation places, while the hierarch showed the emperor the notice about the delivery of the lonely ghost. It read, "Mysterious is the ultimate virtue, and the sect of meditation leads to nirvana. The purity of the truth is all-knowing. It pervades the 3 regions of the universe. Through its countless changes, it controls the negative and positive. Unbounded are the embodiments of the eternal reality. In considering those forlorn ghosts, one should be deeply distressed. At the sacred command of Taizong, we have assembled some chosen monks for meditation and preaching. He has opened wide the gates of enlightenment and rowed far the boat of mercy, saving all the beings in the sea of suffering and delivering those who had long been afflicted by the 6 ways of existence. They will be led back to the right road and revel in the great chaos. In action and in passivity, they will be at one with primal simplicity. For this wonderful cause, they are invited to see the purple gates of the pure capital, and through our assembly, they will escape from the confines of hell to climb to the world of bliss and be free, wandering as they please in the paradise of the West. As the poem goes, a burner of incense of longevity, a few spells to achieve rebirth. The infinite law is proclaimed. The infinite law is proclaimed. Boundless mercy of heaven is shown. When sins are all washed away, the neglected souls leave hell. We pray to protect our country. May it stay at peace and be blessed." When he had read this, the Tang emperor's heart was filled with happiness, and he said to the monks, "Hold firm to your sincerity, and never allow yourselves a moment's slackness in the service of the Buddha. Later on, when the assembly is over, you will be blessed and we shall richly reward you. You shall certainly not have labored in vain." The 1,200 monks all cowed to thank him. When the 3 vegetarian meals for the day were over, the Tang Emperor went back to the palace. He was invited to come back to the Grand Assembly to burn incense once more on the 7th day. As evening was now drawing in, all the officials went away. It was a fine evening. A light glow suffused the boundless sky. A few crows were late in finding their roosts. Lamps were lit throughout the city as all fell still. It was just the hour for the monks to enter the trance. We will omit a description of the night or of how the monks intoned the scriptures when their master took his seat again the next morning. The Bodhisattva Guanyin from Podaraka Island in the southern sea had been long in Chang'an, looking on the Buddha's orders for the man to fetch the scriptures, but she had not yet found anyone really virtuous. Then she heard that Taizong was propagating the true achievement and selecting venerable monks for a grand assembly. And when she saw that the master of ceremonies was the monk Jianglu, who was really a Buddha's son, came down from the realms of supreme bliss, an elder whom she herself had led into his earthly mother's womb, she was very pleased. She took her disciple Moxa and the treasures that the Buddha had given her out on the street to offer them for sale. Do you know what these treasures were? There was a precious brocade cassock and a monastic staff with 9 rings. She also had those 3 golden bands, but she put them away safely for future use. She was only selling the cassock and the staff. There was a monk in Cheng City too stupid to be chosen for the service, but who nonetheless had some ill-gotten banknotes. When he saw the bald, scabby, barefoot figure wearing a tattered robe, the form the Bodhisattva had taken, offering the cassock of dazzling beauty for sale, he went up and asked, "How much do you want for that cassock, scabby?" "The price of the cassock is 5,000 ounces of silver, and the price of the cassock is 5,000 ounces of silver, and the staff 2,000, replied the Bodhisattva. The stupid monk roared with laughter. "You must be a nutcase, scabby, or else a dope. Those 2 lousy things wouldn't be worth that much unless they gave you immortality and turned you into a Buddha. No deal. Take him away." Not bothering to argue, the Bodhisattva walked on with Moxa. After they had been going for quite a long time, they found themselves in front of the Dongwa gate of the palace, where the minister Xiao Yu happened to be returning home from morning court. Ignoring the crowd of lictors who were shouting to everyone to get out of the way, the Bodhisattva calmly went into the middle of the road with the cassock in her hands and headed straight for the minister. When the minister reined in his horse to look, he saw the cassock gleaming richly and sent an attendant to ask its price. "I want 5,000 ounces of silver for the cassock and 2,000 for the staff," said the Bodhisattva. "What's so good about the cassock to make it worth that much?" asked Xiaoyu. "On the one hand, it is good, and on the other, it isn't," replied the Bodhisattva. "On the one hand, it has a price, and on the other, it hasn't." "What's good about it, and what isn't?" asked the minister. "Whoever wears this cassock of mine will not sink into the mire, will not fall into hell, will not be ensnared by evil, and will not meet disaster from tiger or wolf. These are its good points. But as for a stupid monk who is greedy and debauched, who takes delight in the sufferings of others, does not eat vegetarian food and breaks the monastic bands, or a common layman who harms the scriptures and slanders the Buddha, such people have great difficulty even in seeing this cassock of mine. That is its disadvantage." "What did you mean by saying that it both has a price and hasn't got one?" asked the minister, continuing his questions. "Anyone who doesn't obey the Buddha's law or honor the 3 treasures but still insists on buying the cassock and staff will have to pay 7,000 ounces for them. In that case, they have a price. But if anyone who honors the 3 treasures, takes pleasure in goodness, and believes in our Buddha wants to have them, then I'll give him the cassock and staff as a gift. In that case, they have no price." Xiao Yu's cheeks colored, showing that he was a good man, and he dismounted to greet the Bodhisattva. "Elder of the great law," he said, "forgive me. Our great Tang Emperor is a true lover of goodness, and every one of the civil and military officials in his court acts piously. This cassock would be just right for the hierarch, Master Chenek Xuanzangam, to wear in the great land and water mass that is now being conducted. You and I shall go into the palace to see His Majesty." The Bodhisattva gladly followed him as he turned around and went straight in through the Dongwa gate. The eunuchs reported their arrival. and they were summoned to the throne hall. Xiao Yu led the two scabby monks in, and they stood beneath the steps of the throne. "What have you come to report, Xiao Yu?" the emperor asked. Xiao Yu prostrated himself in front of the steps and replied, "When your subject went out through the Donghua gate, I met two monks who were selling a cassock and a staff. It occurred to me that this cassock would be suitable for Master Xuanzang to wear. So I have brought the monks for an audience. With your majesty." The delighted Taizong asked how much the cassock cost. Still standing beneath the steps, and not making any gestures of courtesy, the Bodhisattva and Moxo replied, "The cassock costs 5,000 ounces of silver, and the staff 2,000. What advantages does the cassock have to make it worth so much?" The emperor asked. To this, the Bodhisattva replied, "This cassock has a strand of dragon caked to save from being eaten by the rock, and a thread of a stork jacket to deliver from mortality and lead to sainthood. When one sits, 10,000 spirits come to pay homage. In all your actions, the 7 Buddhas will be with you." This cassock is made of silk reeled from giant iceworms, twisted into yarn by skillful craftsmen, woven by fairy beauties, finished by goddesses. The strips of cloth are joined with embroidered seams, each piece thick with brocade. The openwork decoration has a flower pattern, shimmering with color, shining with jeweled beauty. The wearer of the cassock is wreathed in red mist, and when it is taken off, colored clouds fly. Its primal light slipped out through the 3 gates of heaven. The magic vapor arose before the 5 sacred peaks. It is embroidered with layer upon layer of passion, flowers, and gleams with pearls that shine like stars. At the 4 corners are night-shining pearls, set at the top is an emerald. Although it does not completely illuminate the original body, it shines with the light of the 8 treasures. This cassock is normally kept folded and will only be worn by a sage. When kept folded, a rainbow shines through its 1,000 layers of wrapping. When it is worn by a sage, it will astonish the heavenly spirits and scare all demons. On top is an ass-you-wish pearl, a mani pearl, a dust pearl, a mani pearl, a dust-repelling pearl, and a wind-calming pearl. There is also red agate, purple coral, night-shining pearls, and relics of the Buddha. They steal the white of the moon, rival the sun in redness. Their magic essence fills the sky. Their auspicious light honors the sage. Their magic essence fills the sky, shining through the gates of heaven. Their auspicious light honors the sage, illuminating the whole world. Shining on mountains and rivers, the essence frightens tigers and leopards. Illuminating oceans and islands, the light startles fishes and dragons. At the side are 2 rows of gold-plated hooks. At the neck are loops of whitest jade. There is a poem that goes, "Great are the 3 jewels, and honored be the way. The 4 kinds of life and 6 paths are all explained. Whoever knows and teaches the law of man in heaven can pass on the lamp of wisdom when he sees his original nature. Protects the body and makes it a world of gold. Leaves body and mind pure as an ice-filled jar of jade. Ever since Buddha made his cassock, no one will ever dare to end the priesthood." When the Tang Emperor heard these words spoken in his throne hall, he was filled with joy, and he asked another question, "Monk, what is so wonderful about your 9-ringed staff?" "This staff of mine," the Bodhisattva replied, "is a 9-ringed iron staff inlaid with copper, a 9-sectioned immortal's cane to preserve eternal youth. Held in your hand, it's as light as a bone as you go down the mountain. Brings white clouds. The 5th patriarch took it through the gates of heaven. When Mobu searched for his mother, he used it to smash the gates of earth. Untouched by the filth of mortal dust, it gladly accompanies the godly monk as he climbs the Jade Mountain." The Tang Emperor then ordered that the cassock be unfolded. On examining it from top to bottom, he saw that it was indeed a fine article. "Elder of the great law," he said, "I tell you truthfully that I am now propagating the good word and widely sowing seeds of blessing." At this moment, many monks are assembled at the Huaxi Monastery for recitation of the Suras. Among them is one monk of outstanding virtue whose Buddha name is Xuanzang, and we wish to buy those 2 treasures of yours to give him. So what is your price? The Bodhisattva and Moksha put their hands together, intoned the name of the Buddha, and bowed down. "If he really is a virtuous monk," she said, "I shall give them to him, and I refuse to accept any money for them." With that, she turned and left. The emperor immediately told Xiaoyu to stop her as he rose to his feet and called out, "You told us that you wanted 5,000 ounces for the cassock and 2,000 for the staff, but now that we have said we shall buy them, you refuse to take any money. Are you going to say that I abused my power to seize your things? We would never dream of it. We shall pay the price you asked and will take no refusal." Raising her hand, the Bodhisattva said, "I made a vow that I would give them free to anyone who honored the three treasures, delighted in goodness, and believed in our Buddha. Now, I have seen that your majesty is a good and virtuous respecter of our Buddhist faith, and have heard that there is a monk of virtuous conduct who preaches the great law. It is only right that I should offer them to him. I don't want any money for them. I am leaving the things here. Goodbye." Yeah. Tang Emperor was very pleased with the monk's sincerity and ordered that a large vegetarian banquet be given to thank him in the imperial kitchen. This, the Bodhisattva refused to accept and went airily off. There is no need to describe how she returned to her hide, out in the local god's temple. Taizong arranged for a court to be held at midday and sent Wei Zheng with a decree summoning Zheng to attend. He found the monastic official assembling the monks as he climbed the rostrum for the chanting of Surahs and Gathas. The moment he heard the decree, he came down from the rostrum, tidied his clothes, and went with Wei Zheng to the imperial presence. "Up till now, we have had nothing suitable with which to thank you, Your Grace, for your efforts in acquiring merit. This morning, you met 2 monks who have vowed to give you a precious brocade cassock and a 9-ringed monk staff. We have therefore sent for you, master, to come and receive." "Then," said the emperor, Xuanzang kowtowed in thanks. "If you do not reject it, Your Grace, let us see what it looks like on you." Xuanzang shook it open, draped it across his shoulders, took the staff in his hand, and stood respectfully before the steps of the throne. The monarch and all his ministers were overjoyed. He truly was a son of the Tathagata. Look at him. How elegant his imposing features. His Buddha vestments fit as if they had been made for him. The glow radiating from them fills heaven and earth, while the colors crystallize in the sky. Rows of gleaming pearls above and below, layers of golden threads joining front and back. A hood edged with brocade, embroidered with 10,000 strange designs. Patterns of the 8 treasures hold the threads of the buttons, while the golden collar is fastened with catches of velvet. The Buddha. Heavens are set out in order of eminence, while to left and right are the high and humble stars. Great is the destiny of Xuanzang, master of the law, who is worthy to accept this gift at present. He is just like a living arhat, excelling the enlightened one of the West. On the monkish staff, the 9 rings clink, and richly glows the Barakana mitre. How true that be is a Buddha's son. It is no lie that he has surpassed enlightenment. All the civil and military officials cried out with admiration, and the emperor was delighted. Telling the master of the law to put the cassock on properly and take the staff, he granted him 2 bands of ceremonial attendants, and had a host of officials see him out of the palace and walk with him to his monastery. It was just like the procession for a top graduate in the palace examination. Xuanzang bowed once more to thank the emperor, and then set out, striding majestically along the highway. All the traveling merchants, the shopkeepers, the fashionable young men, the professional scribes, the men and women, young and old, in the city of Shannon fought to get a look at him and praise him. "What a splendid master of the law," they said. "He's an arhat come down to earth, a living bodhisattva come to see us mortals." As Xuanzang went straight to his monastery, where all the monks left their places of meditation to welcome him. When they saw the cassock he was wearing and the staff in his hand, they all said that King Ksatagarbha had come, did homage to him, and stood in attendance to right and left. Ascending the main hall, Xuanzang burned incense and worshipped Buddha, and when he had given an account of the emperor's grade, they all returned to their seats for meditation. Nobody noticed that the red wheel of the sun was now sinking in the west. As the sun sinks, plants and trees are veiled in mist while the capital echoes to the bell and drum. After 3 chimes of the bell, nobody moves. The streets throughout the city are still. The monastery gleams with the light of its lamps. The village is lonely and silent. The Chan monks enter the trams and repair damaged sutras. A good way to purify oneself of evil and nourish the true nature. Time passed in the snap of a finger, and it was time for the special assembly on the seventh day. So Xuanzang wrote a memorial inviting the Tang emperor to come and purr, to come and burn incense. His reputation for piety had now spread throughout the empire. Taizong therefore led a large number of civil and military officials and his empresses, consorts, and their families to the monastery in a procession of carriages to the temple early that morning. Everyone in the city, whether young or old, humble or mighty, went to the temple to hear the preaching. The Bodhisattva said to Moxa, "Today is a special day of the great mass of land and water, which will go on from this first seventh day to the seventh day, as is proper. You and I are going to mingle with the crowds for 3 reasons. To see the service, to see the golden sikeka enjoying the blessing of wearing our treasure, and to hear what branch of the scriptures he preaches on." The pair of them went to the temple. They were fated to meet their old acquaintance, just as the wisdom returned to its own preaching place. When they went inside the monastery, they saw that this great and heavenly dynasty surpassed any other in the world, while the Jetavan monastery and Sravana were no match for this temple. Sacred music sounded clear above the shouting of Buddha names. When the Bodhisattva approached the preaching dais, she saw in Xuanzang the likeness of the wise golden cicada. As the poem goes, pure in every image, free of every speck of dirt, the great Xuanzang sat on his lofty dais. The lonely souls who have been delivered come in secret, while the well-born arrive to hear the law. Great is his wisdom in choosing suitable methods. All his life he has opened the doors of the scriptures. As they watch him preach the infinite law, the ears of young and old alike are filled with joy. As Huan went to the temple preaching hall, she met an old acquaintance who was no common mortal. He spoke about every current matter and mentioned the achievements of many a mortal era. The clouds of the Dharma settle over every mountain. The net of the teaching spreads right across the sky. If one counts the number of pious thoughts among humans, they are as plentiful as raindrops on red blossoms. On his dais, the master of the law read through the sutra to give life and deliver the dead, discussed the heavenly charm to protect the country, and preached on the exhortation to cultivate merit. The Bodhisattva went up to the dais, hit it, and shouted out at the top of her voice, "Why are you only talking about the doctrine of the little vehicle, monk? Can you preach about the great vehicle, monk? Can you preach about the great vehicle?" On hearing these questions, a delighted Xuanzang leapt down from the preaching dais, bowed to the Bodhisattva, and said, "Venerable teacher, your disciple has sinned grievously in failing to recognize you. We monks who stand before you only preach the law of the little vehicle, and we know nothing of the doctrine of the great vehicle. The doctrine of the little vehicle of yours will never bring the dead to rebirth. It's only good enough for a vulgar sort of enlightenment. Now I have the 3 stores of the Buddha's law of the great vehicle that will raise the dead up to heaven, deliver sufferers from their torments, and free souls from their torments, and free souls from the eternal coming and going." As the Bodhisattva was talking, the master of incense, an official who patrolled the temple, made an urgent report to the Tang emperor that just when the master of the law was in the middle of preaching the wonderful law, a pair of scabby and ignorant monks had dragged him down and were engaging him in wild argument. The emperor ordered them to be arrested and brought before him, and a crowd of men hustled the 2 of them into the rear hall of the monastery. When they saw Taizong, they neither raised their hands in greeting nor bowed, but looked him in the eye and said, "What does your majesty want to ask us about?" Recognizing them, the emperor asked, "Are you not the monk who gave us the casket?" "That's right," replied the Bodhisattva. "That's right," replied the Bodhisattva. "If you came here to listen to the preaching, you should be satisfied with getting something to eat," said Taizong. "Why did you start ranting at the master of the law, disturbing the scripture hall and interfering with our service to the Buddha? That master of yours was only teaching the doctrine of the little vehicle, which will never send the dead up to heaven," replied the Bodhisattva. "I have the 3 stores of the Buddha's law of the great vehicle, which can save the dead, deliver from suffering, and ensure that the body will live forever without coming to harm, showing no signs of anger, Taizong earnestly asked where the Buddha's law of the great vehicle was. It is in the Thunder Monastery in the land of India in the west, where our Buddha lives, the Bodhisattva replied, and it can untie the knots of all injustice and save the innocent from disaster. Can you remember it? The emperor asked, and the Bodhisattva answered yes. Taizong then gave orders that this master of the law was to be taken to the dais and invited to preach. The Bodhisattva and Moksha flew up to the dais, then soared into the sky on magic clouds. She appeared in her own form as the deliverer from suffering, holding a twig of willow in a vase, and Moksha stood beside her as Huion, holding a stick and bristling with energy. The Tang Emperor was so happy that he bowed to heaven, while his civil and military officials all fell to their knees and burned incense. Everyone in the temple, monks, nuns, clerics, lay people, scholars, workmen, and merchants, all bowed down and prayed, "Good Bodhisattva, good Bodhisattva." There is a description of her appearance. The sacred radiance shines around her, the holy light protects her Dharma body. In the glory of the highest heaven appears a female immortal. The Bodhisattva wore on her head marvelous pearl tassels with golden clasps set with turquoise and gleaming golden. She wore on her body a plain blue robe with flying phoenixes, pale-colored patterned with running water, on which curled golden dragons. Before her breast hung a moon-bright wind, dancing, pearl, encrusted jade-set circlet full of fragrance. Around her waist was a skirt of embroidery and brocade from the jade pool made from the silk of ice, silkworms with golden seams that rode on colored clouds. Before her went a white and yellow red-beaked parrot to fly across the Eastern Ocean and all over the world in gratitude and duty. The vase she held gave grace and salvation, and in the vase was a sprig of weeping willow to sweep away the fog, scattering water on the heavens, cleansing all evil. Rings of jade looped over brocade buttons, and her golden lotus feet were concealed. She was able to visit the three heavens, for she was Guanyin, the rescuer from suffering. Taizong was so entranced that he forgot all about his empire. The ministers and generals were so captivated that they forgot all about court etiquette, and the masses all intoned, "Glory be to the Bodhisattva Guanyin." Taizong ordered that a skilled painter was to make a true likeness of the Bodhisattva, and no sooner had the words left his mouth than the brilliant and enlightened portrayer of gods and immortals, Wu Daozi, was chosen. He was the man who later did the pictures of distinguished ministers in the cloud-piercing pavilion. Wielding his miraculous brush, he painted a true likeness on the spot. The Bodhisattva's magic cloud slowly faded into the distance, and a moment later, the golden light could be seen no more. All that was visible was a note drifting down from the sky on which could be read the following brief address in verse. "Greetings to the Lord of the Great Tang. In the west are miraculous scriptures. Although the road is 60,000 miles long, the great vehicle will offer its help. When these scriptures are brought back to your country, they will save devils and deliver the masses. If anyone is willing to go for them, his reward will be a golden body." When he had read these lines, Taizong issued an order to the assembly of monks. "Suspend the service until we have sent someone to fetch the scriptures of the great vehicle, and then you shall once more strive sincerely to achieve good retribution." The monks all obeyed his instructions. The emperor then asked those present in the monastery, "Who is willing to accept our commission to go to the western heaven to visit the Buddha and fetch the scriptures?" Before he had finished his question, the master of the law came forward, bowed low in greeting, and said, "Although I am lacking in ability, I would like to offer my humble efforts to fetch the true scriptures for your majesty, and thus ensure the eternal security of your empire." The Tang Emperor, who was overjoyed to hear this, went forward to raise him to his feet. "Master," he said, "if you are prepared to exert your loyalty and wisdom to the full, not fearing the length of the journey or the rivers and mountains you will have to cross, I shall make you my own sworn brother, Xuanzang Cao, to thank him." As the Tang Emperor was indeed a man of wisdom and virtue, he went to a place before the Buddha in the monastery, where he bowed to Xuanzang 4 times, calling him younger brother and holy monk. Xuanzang thanked him effusively. Your Majesty, he said, I have no virtue or talent that fits me for the sacred honor of being treated as your kinsman. On this journey I shall give my all and go straight to the western heaven. If I fail to reach there or to obtain the true scriptures, then I shall not return to this country, even in death, and shall fall for eternity into hell. He burned incense in front of the Buddha to mark this vow. The happy emperor ordered his chariot to take him back to the palace. Later on, an auspicious day would be chosen on which Xuanzang would be given a passport and set out. With that, he returned and everyone dispersed. Xuanzang went back to the Hongfu monastery, where the many monks and his few personal disciples had already heard that he was going to fetch the scriptures. They came to ask if it was true that he had vowed to go to the western heaven. On being told by Xuanzang that it was indeed true, his people said, Teacher, we have heard that the journey to the western heaven is a long one, and that there are many tigers, leopards, fiends, and demons on the way. We are afraid that you may lose your life and never come back. I have sworn a great vow that I shall fall into hell for eternity if I do not get the true scriptures, replied Xuanzang. Besides, as I have been so favored by His Majesty, I shall have to show my loyalty to the utmost if I am to repay the country for his honor. But it will be a journey into the unknown, and there is no saying what my fate will be. My pupils, he went on to say, 2 or 3 years after I set out, or it may be as much as 6 or 7, that pine tree inside the monastery gate will turn to the east, which will mean that I am coming back. If it does not, you can be sure that I will not return. All his disciples committed his words most carefully to memory. At court the next morning, Taizong assembled his civil and military officials and wrote out the document Xuanzang would need to fetch the scriptures, stamping it with the imperial seal that gave the right to travel freely. When an imperial astrologer reported that this day was under an auspicious star for setting out on a long journey, the Tang emperor was delighted. A eunuch official came in to report, the imperial younger brother, the master of the law, awaits a summons outside the palace doors. Calling him into the throne hall, Taizong said, Brother, today is a lucky one for starting on a journey, and here is the pass that will let you through the checkpoints. I'm also giving you a golden bowl with which you may beg for food on your journey, in addition to choosing 2 experienced travelers to accompany you and presenting you with a horse to carry you on your long journey. You may now set out. Xuanzang, who was very happy to hear this, thanked the emperor and took the presents. He was now more eager than ever to be off. Taizong and a host of officials went by carriage to accompany him to the checkpoint. When they got there, they found that the monks of the Hongfu monastery and Xuanzang's own disciples were waiting outside with his summer and winter clothing. As soon as he saw this, the Tang emperor ordered that it be packed and horses be provided, then told an official to pour out some wine. Raising his cup, he asked, Brother, what is your courtesy name? As I am not of the world, I do not have one, replied Xuanzang. The Bodhisattva said yesterday that there are 3 stores, Sanzang, of scriptures in the western heaven. You, brother, should take a courtesy name from this. What about Sanzang from this? What about Sanzang? Thanking the emperor for his kindness, he accepted the cup of wine with the words, Your Majesty, liquor is the first of the things from which a monk must abstain, and so I have never drunk it. Today's journey is exceptional, Taizong replied, and besides, this is a non-alcoholic wine. So you should drink this cup and let us feel that we have seen you off properly, unable to refuse any longer. Sanzang took the wine and was on the point of drinking it when he saw Taizong bend down, take a pinch of dust in his fingers, and flick it into his cup. Seeing Sanzang's incomprehension, Taizong laughed and said, Dear brother, when will you return from this journey to the western heaven? I shall be back in this country within 3 years, Sanzang replied. The days and years will be long, the mountains will be high, and the road will lead you far away, said Taizong. So you should drink this wine to show that you have more love for a pinch of dust from home than for thousands of ounces of foreign gold. Only then did Sanzang understand the significance of the pinch of dust, and thanking the emperor once more, he drained the cup, took his leave of him, and went out through the checkpoint. The emperor went back to the palace. If you don't know what happened on the journey, listen to the explanation in the next installment.